makers, Lisa here from Andrie Designs. I've just finished filming the full-length tutorial for the classic market tote, and I thought I'd pop a quick free tutorial up to show you how to install a magnetic snap. So there's a couple of different ways us designers like to do it, and if you have a look at the PDF tutorial that I have as a download on my website, you'll see that I at that point in time preferred to push my prongs out. Some people prefer it that way, and that's absolutely fine. However, these days I now prefer to fold my prongs in. That will make a lot more sense once we get partway through the video. So without further ado, let's get started on how to install a magnetic snap in your bag. To install the magnetic snap on your lining panels, first we're just going to make sure that we have a center mark along the top flat edge of each panel. So just double checking, we already made that mark along the panel that has the zipper pocket attached. So we can just pop that to the side for a moment. And along the top edge of the second lining panel that does not have the pocket attached, I'm just going to fold it in half, match top corners, finger press, and then mark so that I have a center point on this panel as well. I'm going to do both sides. And then from here we're going to measure and mark where the first half of our snap is going to go. So I'll just move that to the side. So the easiest way to do this, I find, is to line up. I like to line up my fabric on my cutting mat, and I've got my center mark lined up with this line here. Then I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to place the center of my ruler. So this is a 12-inch ruler, so I'm going to place the 6-inch over that line on my cutting mat, and I'm going to measure down according to the pattern directions. So for the small size, I'm going to measure down 1.5 inches, and for the large size, you'd measure down 2 inches. So I'm making the small, so I'm going to measure down 1.5. And the reason I use the center of my ruler is because then I can eyeball and check that these two distances are the same. Or in the case that you're using a ruler that's wider than your panel, you can make sure that the sides of the panel come to the same opposing points on the ruler, so you know that you have your snap installed in the center of the panel. So once you've found the center and measured down 1.5 or 2 inches, we're just going to make a small little mark. I just like to make a little plus at that point. From here, the easiest way to transfer that mark to the other side, because we need it on both sides of the panel, instead of remeasuring, I just take a pin, pop the pin through the center of that mark, and then draw on it where the pin comes out on the wrong side. Just like that. From here, we're going to get ready to fuse the stabilizer to the wrong side of this panel. So taking one of your squares of stabilizer, make sure that you have the bumpy fusible side down towards your interfacing. And all I like to do, the easiest way I find, is to fold my stabilizer in half in one direction and then eyeball it directly over top horizontally of the mark we've just made, and then unfold it. And from here it's very simple. We just flip the panel over, holding the stabilizer in place, and using your iron, give it a really good press to fuse that stabilizer in place. So go ahead and fuse your stabilizer using your iron and pop back here when you're ready to continue. Now that your stabilizer is fused to the wrong side of your lining panel, what we're going to do is take one of the washers that came with your magnetic snap, and we're going to place the center circle or the center slot directly over the plus that you made earlier. Once you've got that sitting directly over it, and I like to make sure that the outer slits are directly vertical, you're just going to take your tailor's chalk and mark those two outer slits, which will be where we cut little slits open for the prongs of our snap. Once you've made those marks, I just like to use a seam ripper, however some people prefer to use little snips, and we're literally just going to cut from the bottom side to the top side of each slit. The key here is to do less is more, so the more snug the fit for the prongs of your half of the snap, the better. However, you don't obviously want it too tight that it's bunched up underneath the snap. If it's too big, if you cut it too far, you can't undo that, but you can always cut it bigger. So I always recommend it's best to start small, test the fit with the snap, and then if need be, make them bigger. So you're just pushing your ripper in and up, and then we're going to test by putting half of the snap, the prongs, through those slits we just made, and just see how it fits. So it sits fairly snugly. I think I might actually just make this side one just a smidge bigger. We'll see how that one fits now. And that's really good. That's a really nice fit. It's not sloppy in the slits. I can't wiggle the half of the snap around in there. It's nice and snug, but it's not too tight either. It's not bunching up the fabric at the back. So when you're happy with your slits, poke one half of your magnetic snap through the front, the right side of your fabric, so the prongs come out on the back. Take the washer that you use to make the marks and place it over the prongs. And then I like to bend the prongs in on themselves to really lock it in place. However, some people prefer to bend the prongs outwards and away from each other. It is somewhat personal preference, so it really depends on what you prefer and how you prefer the feel of it once the bag is made. If you're unsure, try starting with bending them out and see how you like that. And then for future bags, you can always bend them in. When you bend them in, as you might be able to see, they need a bit of a tap down with a hammer to get them to sit flat. So I'm just going to pause and go and do that really quick. If you need to do that as well, make sure you do that. And then we'll pop back and install the second half of the snap on the other lining panel. Okay, so my prongs are nicely tapped down. I just tapped them down with my little hammer just to get them nice and flat. So that side of the lining is done. We've got half of our snap installed. So we can pop that one aside, and then we need to install the second half of the snap to the other lining panel. So make sure you have a second half of the snap, a washer, and also a piece of stabilizer. Feel free to pause the video, measure down and make your mark, fuse your stabilizer and install your snap just like you did for the first half. And once you've done that, pop back here and we will move on to create. Now that you have one half of your snap installed on each of your lining panels should look something like this. One panel should have your zipper pocket and one half of the snap, and the second lining panel should have just half of the snap installed on it. As you might be able to see, I like to leave the plastic on the female half of the snap and pretty much right until the end, till I've completely finished the bag. Just helps protect the surface from scratching, especially because that half is magnetic, so it will try to stick to things like your needle plate when you're sewing your lining and top stitching it later on. I also like to put a small piece of sellotape on the male half of the snap just to help protect it, again to help reduce the chance of it getting scratched. It's just a personal preference thing. You don't have to do it at all, but if you do, the piece of tape needs to be no more than about 1 inch to 1.5 inches long, and it just sits over there and protects it right until the very end, till I finish the bag, and then I can take that tape off, that plastic off, and I know my hardware is still going to be nice and shiny. And that's all there is to it. It is that straightforward and easy to install a magnetic snap. They're one of the easiest bag hardware components to install. They're used a lot in my patterns and other designers' patterns as well. And I hope you've enjoyed and learned something new. If you have any questions whatsoever on installing a magnetic snap, please don't hesitate to contact me via the contact page of my website. And until next time, happy sewing!